back to another episode of the Mental Line. It's me, Akshita Tripathi, and today I'll be co-hosting with
Arjun Chaturvedi, hosted by the Laugh Out Together Foundation. And Mental Line is a monthly mental health based podcast series where we all talk about that powerful little being inside you, your mind. For more information, please feel free to check out Laugh Out Together Foundation on Instagram at @lot_foundation.
For this episode, we will be tackling the topic of mental health in sports. As high school athletes, Arjun and I both have firsthand experience about the pressure that is added on by your sport we play, even though we love it so much. This constant pressure harms your mental health if not helped properly.
As usual, of the Mental Line, we have invited a guest to speak about these very important topics with us. With his PhD in sports and performance psychology, he works to create the best athletic service in OC. Please welcome Dr. Brandon Smith. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we would like to start off by just getting to know a little bit about you. So my first question for you is, what made you interested in your profession? Why did you choose to focus on sports and helping people there?
So I grew up through high school. I really was into working out. I played a lot of sports from MMA and wrestling all the way to baseball and golf. So played a lot of sports, been through that kind of ringer of sports psychology, dealing it with myself. But I would read muscle and fitness magazines back to back and really got into that profession. So my first degree was actually in sports nutrition and kinesiology. So I kind of wanted to do the consultation route of nutrition because I really liked that. At the time, I was really into nutrition. Then I kind of going through that ringer, I wanted to, get into the physical therapy realm. So I got a couple degrees in physical therapy, rehabilitation, and exercise science. That's when I was the director of sports and performance for HQ Unlimited. It's a physical medicine company. So we did everything from chiropractor to physical therapy to strength and conditioning. And then from there, I kind of, moved on, started a business, and that's kind of where I'm at now. The biggest thing was I wanted to understand my athletes more and at a deeper level. I've had that obviously a lot working with, some NFL athletes and NBA and stuff. They'd come in, picked off or whatever it may be, and I just didn't know how to handle it. So I ended up doing a PhD in sport and performance psychology from University of Western States, which was difficult and took a while, but finished. I finished about 2 years ago now. And then it's funny, right after I defended my dissertation is when I was actually going to travel the world for a couple of months, and that's when COVID hit. So I got a good vacation out of it on fun, as a negative of COVID. But
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. So as you were saying, you've played, I'm guessing a lot of sports, right? All throughout high school, maybe even into college. But have you ever had to kind of deal with any effects of like sports pressure or like the pressure of mental health in the past related to sports specifically? Because it seems like you have a really interesting background regarding sports because you played so many, but also your understanding about the physical side and the mental side of the game or
yeah,
games.
so yeah, for sure. So the foundation between coaches and the athletes needs to be upfront noticed. There needs to be compatibility there. I didn't have that with any coaches. The only coaches I had, yelled at me constantly going through all my sports. It was a little different, in the early 2000s compared to the now. The research is well known, but we now know through research that it is not how you get athletes to have a therapeutic relationship with you, is yelling at them. So so I ended up, that's actually what kind of took me out of the baseball and team route and put me into the individual route, wrestling and golf, because I'm my own athlete and I can focus on myself, which actually was, if you know sports psychology, you know that you'll get in your head a lot more. So it didn't help much, but yeah. So I really want to do more research. That's where I again started my PhD because I really felt the need to help people with this. So
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense because honestly, because me and Arjun are both athletes
oh
and
great.
we have like our coaches. I think I've been blessed to have pretty good coaches for the sport I play right now.
Mhm.
But I think we've gotten our like fair share of more harder coaches or people that try to pressure us more. And many times we're pressuring ourselves in order to make sure we achieve what we need to achieve. So I think that just creates a bunch of pressure on us. And as you were saying, it's just you were interested in the psychology, and that's why you got your PhD. And feel like you probably, with all your clients and with all the people that you've dealt with in your life and yourself, I think that you've loaded up enough advice to start giving to people. So what advice would you give to a current high schooler, let's say me or Arjun, that play sports, let's say club sports or just high school sports? And how would we help the pressure that we already deal with? Like in the sense of aggressive coaches or not feeling good enough in your sport? Just what do you feel like is the pressure we deal with, and how do you think we would get advice to tackle that?
Yeah, so it really is a loaded question. As we said, we
Yeah.
can't talk for 20 hours. So, but it is a hard question to be honest. But it's I would say ask your parents to see a sports psychologist, or even a
Mhm.
mental coach like a CMPC, certified mental performance coach. That's through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. So I would say you can look them up on their website, aasp.com. But just as a hotline here. But to get started early on your mental performance strategies. Also,
Mhm.
big thing is play multiple sports, get multiple coordinated modalities before college, find out what you want to do, and or if even want to play in college. So I think a big part of it is getting to know yourself. I think that's the biggest generic takeaway I can give you.
Sure. Yeah. Did want to ask you a bit of a more personal question. You don't have to give names or anything, but have you ever had like a really interesting or like really amazing experience with a client that you really helped? And why do you think you were able to help them so much?
Wow, that's I write about 5 minutes before this. Again, we don't have very long to talk, I know, but right before this, I was thinking of actually how I got started in this. So again, I was the director of physical medicine and sport and performance for this HQ Unlimited physical medicine facility out of Aliso Viejo, California. And so we worked with a lot of athletes, but I had a couple of junior, basketball players. And one kid walked in. I've had him for a while now, about a year. So we're very familiar. I've trained him a long time. And he goes, he walks in super upset, super upset. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? The entire time he actually like got more mad. Like we started training and then he started getting pissed off. He was actually throwing things like just super, super, super pissed off. So sure, I didn't know what to do at the time. Again, I was just like, and so anyways, we sat down. He actually did say, yes, I'd like to talk. He started crying actually. And then we started, deeply discussing this. So he said how upset he was because he lost a game. It was a big game, but it was, he lost a game. And I'm like, why are you so upset you lost one game? I was like, how'd you play? And he goes, well, I shot 30 points. I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You shot 30 points, which is insane for a basketball player.
Mhm.
And that's like Kobe Bryant status. And you're upset that you lost, And so we started talking and we ended up taking the whole session, the whole hour of just discussing, basically coping strategies, as I would say now. And he ended up going home and whatever, still seemed upset, but he went home. His mom called me later. And again, this is a 15-year-old. Mom called me later and she goes, what did you say to my son? And I was a little like scared. I'm like, wow, am I in trouble? And so she goes, whatever you did, thank you. He's been upset for 2 weeks now. I couldn't get anything out of him. My husband couldn't. So I just wanted to thank you really much. That's kind of what started, I guess, the consultation network for me.
Yeah. I think just like most things in mental health, counseling, as I think you were mentioning here, is definitely a key strategy to help, because many times just talking it out works as a good strategy. But I want to go back to the question I asked you earlier and just kind of go to the stem of it, because we understand that there's so many there. We know that there's a stress there. We know that there's a pressure. But what is sports pressure specifically? Because there's so many troubles an athlete faces, but specifically, what would you, if you had to give a definition to sports pressure, and if
Yeah.
you had to give like an idea to it, what would you say?
So, from my experience, with let's say 1,000+ clients from every walks of life and every sport, I've seen many obstacles in a client's way of pursuing their lives and sports. But the main ones, and for sure, they are parental pressures, societal pressures, and this includes friends. And we, the scary part is we now have social media involved. and media in general, which can truly harm people psychologically, more so than any other because of how much time, these athletes and individuals are spending on it. The pressure during competition can also come from coaches and things you can't control, like environmental factors. And that's what, I think that's what really gets in athletes' heads. So I think that's the best sports pressure specifically I can give.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I've suffered with, pressure myself, like I had a couple match points in like a tennis tournament, but I lost the match, So what I did want to ask is, do you have any advice for just like any general advice for athletes who are struggling with this? Because you've touched on that a little bit, but do you think there's some maybe techniques they could do to try to kind of control it? Because I think nerves are so prevalent anyway. Like, is there any way really to kind of control them a little bit more?
Yeah, so that's actually what I do in my, CMPC qualifications is as a mental coach is I actually work that we would call mental skills with athletes. So we'll do a needs assessment, needs analysis, and give them a bunch of surveys and things like that, so I can figure out exactly what's going on and make sure it's nothing deeper than just some anxiety. But from there we go over, I like to call it, I work with mostly tennis players, about 95% of my athletes, but I call it the 5 pillars of tennis, and we'll kind of go over that since that's my focus. But focus and concentration is one. So learning how to do that, learning how to cope with that. Visualization and imagery, like, picking a line with your ball when you're serving, things like that, picking your shot coordinately. Course management, or, court management, should I say. Good court management doesn't go for it. Like, make sure you have 1 swing thought, maybe 2 at the max, things like that. And then I also made up something called Playbox Think Box, which I got through this channel through a sports psychologist and the PGA Tour. But basically, it's you step in, and as soon as you step into that line, which you're about to serve, that's your play box. So once you go to your play box, you can't think anymore. So once you step out of that, you can start thinking and going over what's going on, have that swing thought. But as soon as you step into that play box, which is on that baseline, that's when things are real. So learning how to deal with that as well. And then obviously the big one that we go over, and what I've studied for a while now, is deep breathing techniques, and being present, being patient in the moment. So
Yeah. I think those are things that I feel like throughout the time coaches have mentioned too. And I think it's just a good thing that we have like sports psychologists and people like that to work with people, because not only are there so many troubles that athletes face, it's different for everyone. Like, I think earlier this week I had a lacrosse tournament, and I had my issues in goal as a goalie, and I noticed that my coach talked to me about my troubles and the pressure of moving up, and there's just so many pressures on me. But another player on the team was going through the same circumstances as me, was in the same situation, but she had many other troubles that she was dealing with. And compared to me, she was much more composed. She was less like I was quite all over the place, and it was just it's so different for everyone. So I feel like Arjun has mentioned like stories like this too, and based on how comfortable you are with your mental state and how understanding you are of your own self, how much does that affect you, and how much does that give you the ability to accept loss or be able to regroup your mind into benefiting from many occurrences? I think that's what you're trying to.
Well, again, to be honest, that's the only thing that matters. That's what, that's why we go see a sports psychologist or a mental performance coach to learn those strategies. Because at a young age, we'll say under, 16 years old, you don't know what you're doing. You can do as much research as you want, but then just like the media, a lot of stuff is blatant, and it doesn't represent, truthful scenarios. So learning the actual research from a sports psychologist and put into good terms with you, I think that's where everything else comes into play. So it's super important, and we have to learn those things about us, learn, what kind of personality we are. And when we do, then first of all, the sports psychologist can help us, but another thing is he'll, start giving you the mental skills to prepare for that. So I think that's super important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just, as you were saying, it's really important to go to a sports psychologist when you feel like you need it, because we're still growing. We don't really understand what's happening. But I feel like even when you are let's say, a college player or someone a bit older, I feel like you still deal with pressures and sometimes you need someone there. But another thing that I've noticed is that when you're an athlete, you're trying to be portrayed as someone that's strong, someone that you have a reputation to like consider. And many times people that gets to their mind and they shy away from actually going to talk about their troubles or issues that they're dealing with. And I don't know if I feel like I've seen this throughout some people that I know that are like college players. But I want to ask if you see this within your clients, that some people that like shy away from asking for help just because they think that's like a harder thing to do.
Yeah, we call it a gladiator mindset. And so gladiator mindset is, you're too tough to do any of that, what you just described. So another thing is, Lazarus, a great researcher in sports psychology in 1966 showed that it is different for everyone because individuals interpret situations differently, their pressures are different. So their cognitive appraisals diverge. So there's a primary and secondary cognitive appraisal, right? So we interpret things on two different pathways. Primary appraisal is the initial conclusion someone makes about a situation. You see a lion right away. What are you thinking? And then the second appraisal is what coping strategies are needed to handle that threat. So both the environmental and the athlete themselves will affect the situation, the ultimate situation differently. And then, Kemeny in 2004, 2005, something like that. Don't quote me on this, by the way, but said that the athlete that finds it too threatening can have essential health implications. So again, the age difference there, again, I work with a lot higher level athletes as well. I would say about 20 to 30% are high school. A lot of them are college, D1, Ivy League, and then I work with a lot of professionals. So it's going through life, especially going through that much pressure for a long time. They learn coping mechanisms. So the age difference is a big difference as far as their mindset is. So, we always see a lot of the older athletes, they know how to cope it a lot better. And that's what we're trying to teach in a younger population now, because of nowadays, is what I'm sure we're going to be getting to in this podcast, how much pressure there is nowadays on athletes compared to back in the day. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, that makes actually a lot of sense. So I did want to ask you though, something about like younger athletes too. Do you think that kind of instilling, I guess like techniques and mental health in younger athletes will help them succeed, like as they grow older, like the breathing techniques you were talking about, or the 5 pillars of tennis? Maybe that's applicable to other sports. Do you think help giving that to younger kids is gonna kind of help them grow and see like an evolution in their game and maybe help them do better in the future?
Yeah, that's a broad question, but it's yeah, I think it's that's kind of what we're discussing here, right? Is the implication of an athlete, coming to a sports psychologist, learning strategies, learning coping mechanisms, and then learning that everyone goes through this. I mean, I would say 99% of athletes go through this, if not 100%, and there's millions and millions of people around the world that are feeling some sort of anxiousness or even going through depression, especially the higher level athletes, the AP athletes, things like that. So I think learning it takes time. It is a skill. We have to practice it just like any other skill. Our mind needs to develop that practice. We can't just go into a tournament and think that deep breathing is going to help us. But yeah, so learning that is going to be super helpful for an athlete. We gotta in charge that in them as much as possible.
Yeah. And as you were mentioning, you work with high school students, and definitely, I think the older you are, the better you are able to cope.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask specifically for high school athletes that are not only focusing on their sport. Like obviously, we love our sport; we want to play it as much as possible, and like get on varsity and do all of that. But you also want to pay attention to your academics and extracurriculars.
Yeah.
So with the not patients, sorry, clients that you work with, a lot of the times, do you notice that students that take like a bunch of APs or students that are very engaged in multiple other things are more susceptible to getting burnout or like getting burnt out. And just in all, what's the difference between those that do multiple other things than those that just focus on their sports? Like, is burnout equally happening? I guess I think we have the idea what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, well, again, to give you some research backlash, Marsh and Cleveland in 2003 shown that school athletic participation, so like tennis, school tennis, things like that, and then other extracurriculars, has selection. It's been known to result in positive effects on school grades, coursework, homework, educational, occupational aspirations, self-esteem, applications for higher education, enrollment in higher education, and even educational attainment. But the benefits of extramural sports, such as you said, like doing community service, things like that, are better than those of intramural participation. So they actually see that these are going to help you out mentally more so than intramural activities. So
Oh, wait, that's actually like the opposite of what I was thinking,
yeah.
because I thought that if you do like you take a bunch of APs and are very involved, you would be much more likely to get burnt out.
Well,
But
again, the more things that happen, such as societal pressure, while that will still go up, the more social
yeah,
norms that we exist, we can actually, a lot of the research nowadays is showing that it can actually help us. So again, having a better personality, being more character
yeah,
driven, things like that. So again, research nowadays, especially in the last 10 years, as they say the last 10 years of research has been, more we'll say scrumptious compared to the last 50 years of research. So yeah, it's definitely changing. So that's why we got to always keep up to date on this research. So,
I think
but yeah, it
everything
is
you
super
just
interesting
say.
though.
Yeah, I think everything you just said is super reassuring for me. I think me and Arjun are both very social people, so we definitely
Well,
want.
yeah, you need that. Yeah, you need that. Again, you need that reassurance. You need to talk to people, and the people that have those, frameworks for, buddy buddy frameworks. It helps them out, tenfold. So a
Yeah,
lot of
I
the
think
research is showing that that is the number one thing that we need.
yeah, I feel like whatever you're saying is actually just like making sense now, because definitely when I have a lot of friends that are also like playing sports with me and taking the same courses as me, you get it like a community. And then it's just like because you're part of like multiple extracurriculars, you make friends in all of those. And then you have people that you can relate with. So I feel like that foundation you get from many connections is like what you're referring to and what the research is saying. And I think that's very reassuring for many students out there that are trying to do a bunch of things together.
Oh yeah, and even kind of let's go over the opposite. So the kids that let's say don't have a lot of friends and things like that,
Mhm.
it's been shown to even increase depressive states, things like that, which can actually lead to overtraining and overreaching as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely good to get out there, meet some people, have a community. I think that's super important.
I think something that we should like also pay attention in sports is like getting a good bond within your team, because many times many people like they overwork themselves for their team, but then they never bond with their team, and it's just like it just harms them in the long run. And I just want to say that with the different things we were talking about burnout, I wanted you to just give us a little rundown on what burnout is, and more specifically, what does it look like? Because obviously it's going to be different within people, but what are like some signs of burnout? What does it do, and why is it bad?
So yeah, so it's burnout's a major problem in the U.S. If that's where my research resides, but probably the world as well. It's funny in sports psychology and even in biopsychology. It's been a very big study the last couple of years. Again, there's still relatively little research due to funding and stuff, but it's definitely a big cry for help. The high level of burnout that we see, especially in the elite athletes, is from like 1 to 9%, and then severe burnouts around 1 to 2%, and that's big. I mean, if you're thinking about billions of people, that's super interesting. That's Gustafsson measure in 2007, by the way. So that's still 12, 13 years ago, which I'm sure it's way different nowadays. But yeah, so it's the burnout signs are it's sudden weight loss, sudden loss of appetite, you get chronic muscle and joint pains. And that's the hard part, is that it's so relative to overtraining and overreaching as well, which is scary because it's actually a great term for misdiagnosis with doctors. So people will go to a doctor thinking they're sick, and the doctor will just say, okay, you're sick. They don't ask the relevant questions of how much sport have you been doing? How much sleep have you been getting? And that's what's really, really hurting us. So the kids that go in with actual mental health issues, the doctors are labeling it as, this is super common, by the way, doctors are labeling it as just, physical exhaustion, detraining, overtraining, overreaching, whatever it may be. And so it's really hurting us. So the kids that actually are trying to get help, the doctors who should be the professional in this regard is saying, no, you're fine, just go rest.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a lot of the signs are lack of enthusiasm in your sport, constant illness creeping up here and there, acute soreness, but lasts over 4 days, because most soreness, we call it delayed onset muscle soreness, that usually lasts from 2 to 3 days max, up to 72 hours. And then the thought, having the mindset of just more is better, having that for a long period of time, that can help you struggle as well. And then signs of depression. That's, like I said, it's so relevant. Empirical studies on prevalence rate for depression among athletes illustrate the potentially high risk for athletes to suffer from symptoms of depression. And that's what's scary, and this was, that was research done in the last, 6 months. So it's super scary.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think because of, the whole pandemic and, the kind of like uncertainty of the times, do you think that burnout has increased because of kind of the world scenario of sports? Like people are feeling pressure in their life, so it's leading to kind of a burnout in their sport as well?
Yeah. We're not going to get into politics on here, right? But it's gotten very political, and that's the sad part. And obviously we're talking about COVID. Of course, depression, anxiety has gone through the roof. Suicide and the attempt of suicide has gone through the roof. Research shows that even an additional, I believe, 75,000 people per year, so this last year in 2020, are dying due to what we call, deaths of despair due to COVID. So it's very, very hard along that route, but as far as our athletes that are, feeling more pressure, of course, there's, a lot more pressure. These athletes are doing this for their life. Again, a lot of the athletes I do are nationally ranked athletes, tennis players, top 20 in the US, and they are homeschooled, they're here for life. They're planning on playing tennis, 6 to 8 hours a day. That's their life. So when, COVID happens and they can't go to tournaments, or they can't do these things, they can't make these draws, it throws off their life, and it hurts. So, and then, people like the government telling us we can't have tennis courts open, which is probably the only thing that should be open. It's just so far apart. Like it's difficult. So, it's a big question and big cause for concern. And now, we have this Delta wave variant coming. So, if it is, we don't know. But yeah, we don't know how serious it is yet. But I'm hoping that everyone, like I said, I think right now is the time to see a sports psychologist and go over what I'm talking about, and just see, and talk to someone, get things out. So
I think it's talking, counseling, and management, and just like figuring out ways to like manage everything you're dealing with, even though there's so many changes, and trying
Correct.
to work with all of it. Personally, I feel like COVID has just affected everyone in so many ways. I feel like in previous podcast episode, we've talked about how COVID has affected anxiety and depression and so many things, as you were mentioning. And I think this is something that we can't control. And I guess we will try, like going to a sports psychologist, trying to fix it. But I believe that even though we have all of this pressure, and we've been talking about how pressure is bad, but in times, this is completely unrelated to the whole COVID conversation we just had. But in a sense, sometimes I believe that having some pressure is good. Like many times, a bit of pressure on me in goal will help me block a goal, or like something like that. Like I feel like some pressure, if toned right and like used properly, can help you do better. Do you believe with this mindset? And like, do you have anything to say on how pressure can be good sometimes?
I mean, we need pressure for sure. Of course, we need a certain level of what we call arousal anxiety. There is something I forgot who it is by, but you can look up this. It's called the inverted U hypothesis. I don't know why I forgot. It's one of the most known like sports psychologists in the world, but yeah, it's been a while, so don't hate me. But yeah, inverted U. Although too much or too little is also the problem, right? So if you look at the inverted U, so think about you going this way. So anxiety on one side, arousal on the other. Too high of arousal, then it starts going downhill. High of anxiety starts going downhill. So we need both to function properly. If you go on Google, you can look it up and it'll give you a good diagram on there. But yeah, it's super important that we have some sort of anxiety. But like I said, too little or too much can harm us. So we need to find that state. And like I said, that's what a sports psychologist or a mental coach can do for you. So.
Well, I think we just finding that balance is a trouble for many people. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, it's just when you're younger, you don't find your sport issues that big of a deal. So you won't be like, oh, I don't need to go to a sports psychologist to just figure out my balance. And I feel like that mindset is something that we kind of need to draw out of, like people minimizing their problems because someone else has a bigger problem. And it's just like many people that just they think, oh, I just play varsity at school. Like I don't play club. I don't go play national tournaments. Those people need sports psychologists. But it's like no matter who you are, if you have pressure, if you have to deal with something, I think you should go. And I think that's just like one comment I wanted to make because I feel like you were reiterating that throughout the whole thing. And it's just
So a big thing that you kind of touched on, the people like being too scared to go see a sports psychologist, or again, the gladiator mindset we went over. But it's funny nowadays because again, I train a lot of high level athletes. So whether it's a high level, 14-year-old or a pro athlete, either or, that's what I mean. So but it's actually a cool thing now to go see a sports psychologist. A lot of people are doing it, and I have clients that are 15, 16-year-old that brag that, oh, I just saw my sports psychologist. Like it's a cool thing, I will say. So out of how many athletes we train, I mean, I think it's just because of just like, especially nowadays, I think it's the new fad. Like you see a lot of, athletes your age wearing a lot of like, brown sweatshirts and like UCLA hats and, I mean, even though you're a freshman or whatever it may be. So you guys look up to
UCLA sweatshirt.
college.
So
Yeah, okay, there you go. So you guys look up to that college demographic and then the pros. So if some pro says, oh, I see a sports psychologist 3 times a week on national television, I think everyone that's 12 years old to 15 years old should see one. A 14-year-old is going to be like, all right, for sure. Like the parent, especially the parent, that's parents listen to everything that happens on the news anyway. So so yeah, so I mean it's now getting a little bit different as far as what they do and what they're scared of. But yeah, I mean, there's still those people out there that are a little freaked out by, going to tell someone all their problems. But well, yeah, it is. I will say it's, kind of a cool thing now. So I hope a lot more people understand that and they go out and do it. Remember, it's not about making the pressure, help them. It's about changing their mindset to understand cognitively and psychologically by creating positivity in highly anxious conditions. That's kind of my motto. So not about making pressure help them. It's about understanding that there is pressure and to move on. Right?
Acceptance. That's what you're trying to go for, I think.
Yeah.
I feel, and the whole college demographic thing, that is definitely something I agree with. I mean, even yesterday, my brother was listening to me and my friend talk, and he's only 8. So he was like, oh, you guys sound like this girl on TV that just talks about college. You guys need to stop talking about college. And we're just like, that's what our mind is like drilled into. It's like thinking about our future. And
it wasn't like this when I was your age. So like, let's say, I mean, I'm only 30, but when like, was that 2005? Like it wasn't cool to go to like, think about college. Like we didn't care much about academics. I didn't really care about academics really till
sounds crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's funny. I kind of a short story real quick. So in high school, again, I always did a lot of sports. I was also a sponsored bodyboarder, so I traveled a lot and stuff like that, bodyboarding. But I was very busy. Not that that's an excuse, but I graduated with a 2.6 GPA.
Oh.
And check this out though. So I kind of had an epiphany about 3 months after high school. I was just hanging out with friends, doing whatever after high school. And then after my first degree, I actually made valedictorian with a 4.3. So
Wow.
it's yeah, I kind of went full circle, and kind of changed everything around. But yeah, so I mean, it's interesting though now that the kids nowadays it's and I love it. I think it's amazing because we didn't have that, when we were younger. We also didn't have a lot of people, parents, making go to school and things like that. So I'm glad that you guys do, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't add more pressure to you guys.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting, kind of the shift in 15 years. Yeah, I think I was born in 2005, so 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah. It's
shift, it's very cool. I
yeah,
also I think that even though there is more pressure in academics, it still has I think it has have a net positive change, and I think that people going to see sports psychologists is going to have a net positive change on overall mental health. And I think that what you're saying and what you've been doing is really commendable. I think that how you've been able to help athletes is so awesome. And are there any kind of final comments before we wrap this up that you wanted to say to the audience?
Okay, so again, it's go see someone that's a mental coach. Like I said, go to aasp dot, I think it's .com, but yeah, AASP, type it on Google, go to their website. Then you can search up a CMPC, so Certified Mental Performance Coach. There are people that just specialize. Most of them have PhDs, and they specialize in helping you with your mental skills. They're not someone that's gonna diagnose you with depression. It's not a therapist. It's someone that's going to talk to you about mental skills and really help you, actually help you with your sport. They'll go to your golf tournaments. They'll go to your tennis matches, and they'll actually see what's going on with you. And then another thing, yeah, follow us on Instagram. If I can shout that out real quick.
Yeah.
So Next Gen, so NEXGEN, Next Gen _ Athletic Performance. That's our company. We're based out of Racquet Club of Irvine in Irvine, California, and right by uni. I think it's like a half a mile from uni, I think. But yeah, so yeah, holler at us.
I mean, maybe I'll go and follow you guys too today.
There you go. Yep.
Of course.
Yeah, well, I just want to say this conversation has been super insightful for me, Arjun, all the listeners, because everyone, especially people that are athletes, just sometimes need to know what they have to do because we're not the most accepting of what we're dealing with. We just try to
Yeah,
bulldoze through it.
exactly.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for everyone listening. Make sure to join us every month for a conversation for more discussions on mental health issues and how to cope with them. And to contact Dr. Brandon Smith, email him at specializedmovement@gmail.com. And go follow the places he shouted out because they can definitely help you.